25, 26, 27, 28. Oh, hi. Welcome back to the channel. I was just counting tree rings, enjoying an ice lolly on this second day of spring, and it just got me thinking about climate change. I wonder what thoughts you had on climate change, whether you think it's a thing, what evidence is there for climate change, and what can we do about it, what are the effects. So I'm going to try and go through some of these now. My ice lolly is dripping. So ice lolly, ice core, we'll come back to that in a minute. Now, so first of all, what evidence is there that climate change is happening? So if you ever think about it, make a little list. Do you know any things that could be used as evidence? Okay, so first of all, we've got this. Okay, so what this tells us is that over thousands of years, the global temperatures have been increasing and decreasing, increasing and decreasing. So anything above this line here is where global temperatures were going through a period of warming. They're called interglacials. Anything below this line here are our glacial periods, so our ice ages. So actually, maybe global warming isn't really a thing, and we're just in this period of time here where we're naturally going through a warmer period. So is that evidence? Maybe that's evidence that climate change isn't happening. Second piece of evidence we've got here are since the Industrial Revolution, so since about 1800s, there's evidence to show that actually global temperatures are increasing. So we're going through that period of warming and the temperatures are record highs. Okay, so let's just delve into that a little bit more. Where's that evidence come from to provide that? So we're looking at carbon dioxide levels mainly, so we're looking at greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide being one of the main ones. So where do scientists get this information from? So this brings me back to my ice core, my ice lolly. So just like my ice lolly here, chocolate, strawberry and vanilla. Scientists went to Antarctica, where it's miles away from any human influence. They can take huge ice cores out the ground, and then they can look at the different layers within that ice core. They can look at animals that are, or organisms that are trapped within the ice, and they can look at the gases that are within the ice. So what that tells us is global temperatures began to increase when the amount of CO2 trapped within the ice core began to increase. That's one piece of evidence. Back to my tree and my tree rings. Scientists also say that you can count the age of a tree by counting the tree rings. That's what I was trying to do with this one here. But actually it's about the thickness of the tree rings. So as the tree rings get thicker, it's evidence that we're going through a period of warmer, wetter conditions. Okay, so we've got evidence in ice cores, evidence in our tree rings, and then we've got evidence in pollen. Okay, so pollen that's in plants. Some plants prefer warmer, wetter conditions. Some plants prefer drier, cooler conditions. So by looking in mud where bits of pollen have been trapped for thousands of years, you can actually see what plants and animals were around at that time. So evidence of pollen analysis tells us that the climate is getting warmer. Finally, then those temperature records. So in Antarctica is a really good place to study climate change. So global temperature records, like the graph I've just shown you, is evidence that global temperatures, both air temperatures and sea surface temperatures, are on the increase. Okay, so what can we do about this? So well, first of all, what can we do about it? What are the causes? So why? So we've mentioned CO2. Greenhouse gases, but where have they come from? Is it all our fault? So let's start with us, because we're always to blame for these things. So there's an increase in people in our planet. On our planet, they need somewhere to live. So cement production releases huge amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So that's for buildings. Think about all those countries that are going through rapid industrialisation and urbanisation. That's a lot of development, so a lot more cement is being used. We've got the burning of fossil fuels, so all the things within our home. So more people means more stuff needs to be produced. Fashion, furniture, technology within our home, microwaves, phones, washing machines, hoovers, all the stuff that we fill our homes with, unnecessary stuff quite often, that all needs to be produced in factories. That's being the energy comes from burning fossil fuels. Farming, so more people means more food. So rice production gives off other greenhouse emissions. So we've got a production of methane. So rice production and cows for meat and for dairy. So more people, more rice, more meat, more dairy. So all of those are significant in the production of methane, another greenhouse gas. Finally, deforestation. So again, more people, we need more space. So we clear more forests. Why is that important? So remember, trees absorb carbon dioxide. So if they're not there, they've been cut down, they're not storing that CO2. But maybe it's not all our fault. Maybe, as before, it's part of the natural changes, so the glacials and interglacials. So maybe global warming is caused by natural phenomena, such as orbital changes. So maybe the spin of the Earth means that actually we're just that little bit closer to the sun, making us a little bit warmer. Maybe the sun itself is giving off more heat, so that's solar output. Or maybe it's volcanic activity. So volcanoes, life is not possible without volcanic eruptions, giving off the gases that we need for our atmosphere. But maybe volcanic eruptions, they're giving off this, the global gases, greenhouse gases. Okay, so maybe it's us, cement, deforestation, burning of fossil fuels or farming, or maybe it's natural causes, solar output, volcanic activity, orbital changes. So why is this significant? What is global warming causing? So can you have a look to think about the effects of climate change now? Okay, so let's break this into two. We've got environmental effects and then effects on people. So environmental effects, can you think of how climate change is affecting the environment? Okay, so we've got climate change, global warming, we've got ice melting. If ice is melting, sea levels are rising. If sea levels are rising, then that's going to put people's homes at risk, storm surges, for example. Coral bleaching, so coral within the ocean dying, so that's affecting the whole ecosystem of marine life within our oceans. And changing weather patterns, more rain, wetter places getting wetter, less rain, drier places getting dry, and that increase in desertification. So how is this affecting people? So we've got sea levels rising, thousands of people, whole entire countries in the Indian Ocean, Bangladesh, Mauritius, the Seychelles, all of these countries are very low lying countries at risk of being completely flooded. That's millions of people at risk of being displaced from their homes, having to move to a complete new country for somewhere to live. Farmland is destroyed, can't grow crops, so we've got starvation, warm stagnant water, the spreading of disease. And finally we've got extreme weather conditions becoming completely unpredictable. Like what we've experienced here, for example. We've had last summer, 2018, was the hottest summer on record, yet the winter before that, the end of 2017 into 2018, we had the worst winter that we'd ever have. So we can see extremes. We're unable to plan and predict for these things. Okay, so what can we do about it? So this is the hardest kind of question that you might have. Broken into, how do we, what strategies are there for mitigation? So mitigation strategies, how can we reduce climate change? And arguments then for adaptation. We can't do anything about it, we've just got to adapt to it, put up with these changes. We've adapted in the past, we need to adapt to the future. Okay, so strategies for mitigation then, what can we do to reduce the effects of climate change and global warming? Easiest one to start with, back to my tree, plant some more. afforestation, planting trees. Trees absorb carbon dioxide, and actually newly planted trees are more efficient at absorbing carbon dioxide than virgin forests. So we've got planting trees. We've got carbon capture, actually just capture the carbon dioxide that is in the atmosphere that's causing our problems. We can inject it into rock, into the ground, where it can be stored naturally. We have alternatives. So you, me, we can use alternatives. We can use less within our home, so just turn down the thermostat. We can use put jumpers on. We don't need heating on as much. Make sure that our equipment in our homes is modern, so modern fridges, modern ovens, so we're going to be using energy more efficiently. Use alternatives: solar power, wind power, hydroelectric power, nuclear power, so anything to produce energy that isn't going to be contributing to increasing CO2 within the atmosphere. Finally, which is perhaps more significant because I can't do it on my own, I can't do it with your help either, and actually we need some government input. We need international agreement, not just our government, but where governments are working collaboratively around the world. So we need international agreements. And we tried this once. It wasn't entirely successful, but it's successful in part. The Kyoto Protocol, where all the developing nations around the world got together to set limits on CO2, where you can only produce so much CO2. Now, some countries didn't like this because they like making stuff, they like making money, they don't believe in climate change and global warming, so actually that was a big failure of this. And it's many of our developing nations that are urbanising, increasing their levels of development. They need to be able to make stuff in factories, and they haven't got the money to invest in alternatives. So the cheapest way for them to do it is by burning as much coal as possible. So we need international agreements. How about adapting to it then? So just to accept it's happening, we need to just adapt to the change. So we need to change the way that we grow things. So grapes, it means that in my garden I could grow oranges and lemons and vines for grapes, which would be brilliant. So we can adapt our farming methods. We need to adapt it in other ways too. So we need to think about how we can manage our water supply. So poorer countries that are experiencing increased levels of desertification because of climate change, they need to look at ways, remember the magic stones? So the ways of capturing the water, the little water that they have. So improved irrigation systems. Remember that tiny just drip irrigation systems, rainwater harvesting, wells, using groundwater sources. Maybe we can think about ways then of coping with sea level rises. So sea walls, move away from the coast, dams, damming rivers. Okay, so let's just sum up then. We've got evidence for climate change, natural changes, human, caused by humans, the effects of that on people and the environment, and then what can we do about it? Strategies to mitigate, strategies to adapt. So now it's over to you. What are your thoughts on that? Okay.